appreciate you guys coming and taking the time, and our presenters as well. And as always, we appreciate Josh and his whole crowd. Let's see, we don't have anything on the consent agenda or for the administrative session, so we'll jump to the legislative session. Oh, yeah, sorry. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
A motion to approve the agenda as written.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and I'm an aye. Let's see, we have some minutes. Any comments or questions that you have on those minutes? Any further discussion? All right, do I have a motion? Second?
Yeah, second. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
I am too. Okay. Again, we have no consent agenda, no administrative session, so we'll jump right into the legislative session. And we'll first hear from Public Works. Well, for both of them, we hear from Public Works. We do that.
Okay.
We do the hearing afterward, right? The public hearing after.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. My name is Chris Wilson. I'm the city engineer. I've been with the city for about 2 years, and I got the lucky opportunity to do one of the presentations to you tonight. So I'm going to present on our transportation master plan, and right now we're working through these. As I'm sure you'll see a few more if you've already seen a few of the master plans coming through. So to start off, why master plans, and specifically why a transportation master plan? And this is a quote out of our master plan: is to have an effective transportation system, the city requires a connected street system. With the master plan, we establish levels of service. Levels of service are based on what kind of capacities we want, how movement, access, things like that are established. Projects, demands, and forecasted estimated growth. Quantify system assets. We set model parameters. And we formulate capital projects. At any time, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, I'll just kind of continue through. So our city consisted of approximately 150 miles of roadway. And this particular update includes a few items. The MAG 2040 roadway network and Transplan 50 updates. So those are, if you're not familiar with MAG's a regional entity that helps planning in our region of Utah. And their Transplan 50 is kind of like their regional master plan for year 2050. And then we have the capital facilities plan, project lists, and costs. So those continually update as we look at the forecasted year time frame, and we update those plans and the costs of those projects with inflation and other things. So level of service, we look at a few different things. Lane capacities is one. We set levels of service based on a grading system, going from A, B, C, D down to E, F. F is fail. Really, really good would be an A, some brand new road with very little on it. We use a national standard, which is set to be 80% of capacity, and that is level service D. So the reason for that is that it still allows movement and helps keep costs down of projects and infrastructure. The next level of service we have is intersection delay. So when we look at an intersection, similarly, we use a level of service D, and that's based on a timing that it takes a vehicle to get through that intersection, whether it's signalized or unsignalized. And these the level of service looks at the 80th that capacity, that 80% capacity at the peak time of day. So it's not just like all the time, but it's specifically at the worst, most congested point.
How do you guys measure that?
So you based on the flow of traffic going through. So how many vehicles you can get.
But I mean, how specifically, how do you, is it Wavetronics equipment or how do you measure?
So there can be lots of different instruments you can put out. There's tubes where it counts vehicles when they drive over them. You could have camera systems. It could be other LiDAR type equipment that Wavetronics might have, things like that, and that you can count the vehicles that way. There's other.
Do you guys use all of those methodologies? Is that what you're
Yeah, it just depends on the area, what tools we have at the city. Specifically, we have a box we can put out that takes radar. Will tell us speeds. It's not great on counting because it's shooting out a radar for over continually, so it'll take a measurement of a vehicle several times. We do have a camera system now that we can set up at an intersection, and it'll actually record. Intersection or any point on a road, records the data, and then we can upload it to online in a software, uses AI to actually identify different vehicles. It'll count the vehicles. It'll classify
it's
them.
not constant measurement, it's periodic measurement, then you go in, we don't have a specific methodology that's used constantly to
So
measuring those
you'll-
intersections.
No. So we would have to go out and target and do we'd have to have an intent to go out and measure at a specific location during specific times.
And how often do you do that?
It depends on the demand, or what's happening. If we're seeing an increase if it's a speeding related issue, if it's a accident related, or if it's an intersection complaint based, hoping to be more proactive. And as we have intersection improvements planned in our master planning, that we'll go out and kind of measure, every year, every 6 months, kind of the way that growth is impacting those.
The only reason I'm asking these questions
Systems.
is because growth has been so significant in Springville in last few years, right?
Yeah.
And so as I listen to this and think about the future, I hope that we have what you just described, that we have in this plan, right? This is a plan. And I hope that in this plan it says, here's how often we go out and measure these. Because my personal experience is all I can draw from, really. I guess I see stuff on social media sometimes about it. But I hope that we include in that plan a regular, so we're consistently looking at that as we see the growth. Hunter probably understands this stuff 1,000 times better than I do, but as we see the growth going on in the community, I hope we're looking at that on a regular basis. And I know it's hard right now, especially with 1600 South going in and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes good sense. We don't have a specific, like I was saying, going out every 6 months in there, but we do require, as development comes in, that they provide traffic impact studies. So we're continually getting studies that as the development of, development A, B, or C comes in, and their impact to those areas, and then we just monitor as a needed basis on other areas, but we want to be more regular with it.
Yeah, I would hope that you guys would put this in your master plan.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that and
Okay.
consider that.
Speaking to that, I think what is being mentioned is a good point to be able to, on the city level, rather than requiring developers to do those traffic impact studies, be able to study that, because in previous experience, traffic impact studies for some developments can be kind of like appraisals, where you can kind of aim it where you need it to land. And so I would think that the city would be able to take a non-biased view on traffic impact studies if we were to look at that as a city, rather than a developer trying to pass what fits their motive. So.
Might get one perspective only.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe we ought to let him do his presentation, and then we may have our questions get answered.
You're good. You're good. And that is something that we've recognized. And in this year, I did purchase a camera system for being more proactive in taking studies on more regular intervals. So it's definitely something that we're looking at and considering. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so this map is a map of our existing level of service. What this does is it takes those capacities and it's putting a number to these different roads. It's primarily looking at our larger road networks. You can see that you have we have a few signals that are unacceptable in that level of service E range that's lower than our level of service D. Both of these, or one of them is a UDOT signal and the other one is a Springville City signal. Then there's the level, we have our road networks, and as you can see, the yellow ones, those are all that are coming in, those are all level of service D, which are acceptable. So we take then projected demands and forecasted growth. We take the future road capacities and predict future condition. We take the existing and we predict the future. We use the current zoning and densities, the future estimated population growth, and we try to come up with a plan for the next 10-year period. Using that with the general plan, we can, as we work with planning and as things change, we update the plan based on what the densities may be. So we take, then we set model parameters. There's a concept we use, it's mobility versus access. This is looking at what's the purpose of the road. Is the purpose of the road to increase movement, or is it to create access points? So if you look at this, as you have more access, you are typically going to have a slower moving road. You'll get to your locals, maybe even to the point of a cul-de-sac. You're kind of getting to destinations where you have lots of movement and you want to keep it moving and you have controlled access. You go from those locals to collectors, arterials, and up to like freeway type classifications. You can't have both. Then we use a model called TAS, or Traffic Analysis Zones, and what that is it's you're looking at your destinations, and MAG they use a regional concept where they're trying to get from city to city or from county to county, or to that broader perspective, and then Springville City is looking at it from a tighter perspective and neighborhood to neighborhood or residential to commercial type areas, and then we use those functional classifications to connect those dots. We use a few different functional classifications of our roads. We don't have as many of the bigger roads. Usually those are UDOT roads. When you get into your 7 lanes, we have a few 5 lanes, so that'll give you 2 in each direction with a turning lane. And then we have 2 to 3 lane collectors, and then we get down to just our 2-lane local roads. Street cross sections, this is a typical local residential where you'll notice that all of our cross sections will be similar on the outside. The crust is going to be curb gutter, park strip, and sidewalk with the occasional trail, possibly. And then the inside, the asphalt is where you're going to see the difference. So you have on your local, you'll have the two lanes with shoulders, and then this is your commercial local, which is similar but is a little bit wider, so it allows for some of your bigger vehicles and also on-street parking of those vehicles. Your minor collector gets a little bit bigger and gives you those 2 lanes, and it gives you the on-street parking or the ability to have other facilities for active transportation. We get to our bigger arterial roads. It's too wide to show on here, so you get just a half a section. So similar, you can relate it to the collector, but now we throw in a raised median in the center, which when that raised median goes away becomes your 2-way turn lane. And then this is the same cross section, but includes a trail system on that arterial road. Okay, this map here is our 2040 build functional classification map. This is kind of gives you an idea of the different roadway sizes that we have. Your local roads are all the really light gray ones in the background, and then you get to your yellows, which show your collectors, and then you get to your arterials and your turquoise and your blue. You can see that those arterial roads that we have currently, the dark blues, those are the major arterials. Those are all UDOT roads, and then we do have some turquoise, which are our minor arterial, which we're developing a few of those in the city as we're building out in some of these areas. 12th West being a main one, and in the future 2600 West also getting north-south. Then we have our 2040 no build level of service, and this will give you an idea of the where we'll be at in that 2040 scenario with volumes and the capacities. So the numbers on the roadways kind of indicate where we're at, as well as the signals. And as you can see, those same two signals are still in level of service E. And then we have our roadways. There are a few of them that are red, that are indicating level service E as well. And then we get just those same ones that were in level service D. So this is assuming that we don't complete any of the projects that are in the list. So then we get to 2040 level service with completing the projects that we have in our list, and we alleviate a lot of those issues. The red ones go away to level service D. And the few that are left in red are still remain UDOT, but they're isolated just to the north end of Main Street within the city. And as you can see, this is bringing in completing some of the networks that we don't have, like 12th West and others. So the more webbing we get, the more connections we get, the more it spreads out the traffic and helps alleviate capacity issues.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So as far as working with the UDOT on some of those that obviously are gonna be the heaviest travel, right? We just deal with whatever they give us?
Well, we meet with them periodically. The Public Works Director, Brad Stapley, has monthly meetings with UDOT, and so they work together and talk about plans, compare plans. MAG gets involved as well in trying to plan regionally to help with those. There are different projects that they, as you see, as we do more in local projects, it helps to alleviate those as well. And as we get other access points to freeways, those bigger roads, and distribute that load out, it helps distribute that. So we do work together at a local and then at a more regional level to try and resolve those issues. But ultimately, it's pretty rare that the city would fund a project for UDOT. Typically, we're trying to help remind them of those deficiencies, and then they are typically looking at state funding to get those projects done.
So do we have any influence on what kind of prioritization those projects become as we demonstrate some of these challenges we're having? Does that influence them at all? Is that?
Like when Brad's meeting with them on a monthly
Right.
basis.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Do they listen to anything Brad has to say, or do they
talk
just
to
say,
that Brad at
yeah,
all, or-
that's great, Brad, see ya? Great. So in terms of influence, then, you feel like you have the influence, and when they make their plans, they are including at least some of your concerns, comments?
another part of kind of the myriad pieces of this is that MAG, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, handles essentially the regional transportation planning for the area and helps coordinate a lot of that regional prioritization and the relationship between the cities and the state in terms of doing those regional projects, because all the UDOT facilities are all really regional facilities and impact multiple jurisdictions. And so UDOT actually receives portions of its project funding from the federal government through MAG as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So we all have to kind of work together to set regional priorities and respond to regional demand.
So MAG's where we get our leverage
It's one
organization.
element of that relationship. Yeah, Brad exerts a lot of influence in those meetings. Our lobbyists last year secured additional funding to help fill a funding gap on the 1600 South project that had emerged. You know, our mayor and other elected officials also, use their influence and relationships. So we have a lot of. It's definitely a
pressure.
lot of points of contact with UDOT. Correct.
And the biggest key is just the open communication. Started working together with those other agencies.
Great, thank you.
So this map here is just a snapshot of all the projects planned in the current master plan. As you can see, there's a lot of intersection improvements, some that are actually currently going on now. As you can see around the high school area, there's some projects in there that are happening now, and then there's other ones throughout the city that are just planned within the next 10 years. The level of my presentation tonight will take us to this point of these projects, and in this slide, I'm happy to answer any additional questions, and future we'll have our impact fee in relations to these projects that will be presented for adoption later.
I have a few questions if no one else has any. This is great. Thank you for putting all of this together. My first question comes back to when you're looking at all these different studies and moving people from one place to the other, the city recently looked at its active transportation plan. How does that factor into a lot of these street widths, moving people from point A to point B, locations of intersections, those improvements? I'm just curious because that seems to be a big part of how we're going to be designing the streets.
Yeah, definitely. So the active transportation plan has basically like a paralleled map that we can overlay on this one. So as we look at doing a project on a specific street, we reference the active transportation plan as well, and then include that element from the active transportation plan in those particular projects. So we make sure that the two of them parallel. And this plan does reference and say, hey, we need to look at that plan and also have consideration of that. And we do have cross sections, that have trails, or in some situations it may just be a matter of marking the streets that it's a shared use, or whatever those may be. We should have the widths that we need to accommodate them. It's just the configuration. And sooner than later, we'll have our more details updated that include those active transportation elements.
Well, and speaking to that with the road widths and how you're accommodating for those, I think it's great that you're taking into account those traveling, those bike paths or things that may be included. My one, question in looking at the street widths that are proposed, and knowing when we went to the general plan introduction meeting, it was a couple months ago or a little while ago, some of the major concerns that were brought up there that were near the top of the list were alternate housing alternatives, or just housing alternatives, and incentivizing development. Currently, with our right-of-way width as a minor residential road being, I think it's 59 feet, with a 10.5-foot travel lane plus the 4 feet plus the 2-foot gutter pan, I wonder if is there flexibility when a developer comes to you and says, "I'd actually really like to have a 20-foot asphalt to asphalt with a 24-inch gutter." Like, is there flexibility to help incentivize and bring down infrastructure costs for a developer that would be providing an alternate method of housing?
So yes and no. So there are some different constraints you'll have. Like, part of that is fire and emergency access, and there's widths that govern those. So 20 foot is a pretty tight one for them. It's depending on what you have on the outsides of that as well for emergency access. The other side of that also is that we do allow what I would call a substandard cross section, but it becomes a private road at that point. So you could have situations where you have alleys and other roads that are smaller than our cross section. But the hard part about that is you get to a point where you have to fit all of the utilities to serve those in it. So there is a point where like you get to a size that you can't fit all the utilities. So for example, we're working with Lakeside Landing, and they are starting to get some of these private roads and alleyways and stuff, and we still have to feed them utilities, and we've maxed out their corridors with the utilities to fit within that area, and we're still struggling, I think, to squeeze in some of the public utilities or your gas and electric and the other stuff beyond what Public Works manages and maintains. So there's kind of two things that you're dealing with there. Is you got to fit all your utilities in that corridor, plus get the accessibility in there as well. So there is ways we can play with it, but mostly those smaller cross sections would be private because they would be below our standard of
And
maintenance.
that would include if they wanted to modify, say, the 8-foot planter as well. Because, I mean, generally, trees in Utah are okay to have 5 or 6, and right now we're requiring 8.
Yeah, so that just depends on the canopy size for the different trees. So typically your root section follows your canopy of the tree, depending on the species. And so we do have different guidelines for different tree sizes and when you can and can't use trees within park strips, depending on the various widths of the park strip.
Okay.
I have a question on did your study include the new high school?
Yes. So as you can see down on the right of the screen, the 77s, the 105, those projects all are geared around the high school. So there is the new road connection that'll come up from 620 South up to 4 South. So that'll be a new connection that'll come that we don't have currently or didn't have before. It's built, but it won't be open until the school is ready to open. And then there are some intersection improvements that are included in that area as well.
What will you guys be doing on 400 South there?
There'll be
There'll be a light, a roundabout?
a signal. Yep.
Yeah, I'm with Hunter. I think the planter strips take a really lot of real estate, that's for sure. It creates a real big challenge for developers because it's numbers.
Yeah, it's hard. I understand the extra space. I also look at it as it does provide a place for utilities and other things as well. It provides the location for fire hydrants, water meters, signage, street signs. If you don't have that area, then you put them behind the sidewalk, which then protrudes further away. Then you end up with other interference, and it goes both. And you have them both ways in different places. But a lot of it is a look that I think the city's generally been in favor of. Is we've gone from not having them to now standardizing that 8-foot width to establish trees. We are a tree city, USA, so that's part of our goals is to have that beautification part of it.
Sure.
And sorry, I'm talking again, but so how does that play into, like, say, the revitalization of Main Street in terms of when we have buildings that are now coming up to the edge of the right of way, and say as we reach build out and as we're starting to grow as a city, I think our street sections are going to be more and more complicated. And how are we going to be accommodating for those rather than having 6 to 8 standard sections?
Yeah, so typically our sections are based on just that function of the volume of traffic that they're moving. In regards to Main Street, I mean, that is a great question, and we are looking at some different projects currently. Even for we've looked at the south end of Main Street, and we're looking at the north end of Main Street now, and looking at ways. I mean, Josh is probably very happy that we are moving getting the buildings closer to the right of way.
And I'm actually, that's why I asked, because I think generally, even as, you know, our city core starts to mature and grow, I mean, buildings tend to grow closer to the road as it naturally happens. I mean, we've seen it historically all over the United States. So I'm curious, as we're essentially with our street sections now, we're pushing them further and further back to accommodate traffic. But if we wanted to avoid just more suburbs, how do we allow that to happen where the buildings are allowed to start to come closer and actually help with that traffic calming rather than just only traffic moving?
Yeah, so I think I mean, maybe Josh can speak to this more, but I think a lot of the direction that we've gone with the different overlays is to actually allow the buildings to come forward and be more, right up against the right of way to help, if that's what the purpose, I mean, Josh can answer the purpose, but I mean, if that calming is the feature you're looking at, then yeah, it would be doing that.
So it's essentially asking for a variance to our street sections to be able
No,
to allow
so
that.
setbacks don't have any, the street sections and setbacks, as the code's certainly set up, are not at all related. I mean, you may say there's a implied contextual relationship, but there is no functional relationship between them. So you can have a residential local with a 10-foot front setback. You could have a commercial, you could have an arterial or a collector that has a 30-foot setback. It all depends on what the land use regulation is. And that's one thing our code doesn't do well, is tying together street context and land use context. So what you mentioned about how could we do this without having just a bunch of street sections? And actually, a lot of practice now is tending towards having more street sections.
Right.
Salt Lake has recently completed like a street, essentially a context study, a topology study, which greatly widened their range of sections to respond to land use topologies, not just to road functional classification. Because we may want a different arterial if it's a main street than if it is 51 going down to Spanish Fork, where that balance between access and mobility is different. So that's something we will tie closer together as we move into updating our code and evaluating kind of the philosophy behind transportation planning as we go through the general plan, to make sure that we thoroughly analyze the relationships between the streets and development, especially from an urban design perspective.
Yeah.
But right now, setbacks and street sections are pretty much distinct elements in the code.
Yeah, and I apologize for all the questions, but it's more, I am trying to take the stance of I would like to give good tools, like as many as possible, like what Salt Lake City does, as many street sections as possible where they're appropriate, rather than requiring developers to use a street section that may not be necessarily appropriate for their context. So that's why I asked the question more.
Yeah.
And we'd be, as we go through the process, happy to take input on that. I would love to arm wrestle Chris for two less feet of asphalt in a residential local, but I think generally we're pretty close to pretty ideal street sections. And Public Works has actually been great, like in Lakeside on the commercial local collector, those streets, we actually did reduce pavement width, essentially in relation to context in those. We didn't reduce overall right-of-way width. We weren't there yet, but we've got it's Public Works has been a really good partner in kind of evaluating all that. So, but if there are specific contexts you think we don't have the tools to respond to, well, we're happy to hear those. We know of a couple, especially in kind of legacy residential areas that have been annexed into the city and never were built to kind of a standard. You know, if there may be a gap in our standards to accommodate something like that, but if you see more, I'd be interested in hearing them, because it's not something that's really popped up in our discussion a lot.
And to add to that, at the state level, there's been a lot of conversation over the last year or two about what is the proper exaction or over exaction of right of way width specific to the asphalt section. And there was a lot of back and forth with developers. Ivory Homes was a very big player in there, and they wanted to get the minimum, like by state code, so cities couldn't go beyond a certain width, and I think they got down to like 32 feet of asphalt, and we actually are 29 feet of asphalt, so we are below that. So
Yeah.
you know, in relation to other cities and what the state minimum would be, we're doing well.
That's good. Any other questions? Comments? All right, if not, that was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll go ahead and, Brad has comments. Yeah, I'm just about to open it.
Talk about these.
Got it.
So he's looking at me like, what's going on? So let me pull something up here that we can get to that.
What an honor it is to have Brad here. We all feel extra special because of you, Brad.
Now you got me all confused.
A little flustered.
Well, it's my fault that. Yeah, I'm going to use part of the presentation that I'll be giving you in just a few minutes, but I want to go down. So, in the email that you received, you got 3 different documents that you were looking at. You looked at the master plan, transportation master plan. You looked at the impact fee facilities plan, and you also looked at the impact fee assessment, right? And literally, what the assessment does is it takes the cost of the projects that are growth related, and it divides them by the amount of equivalent residential units, so that we get a basis for what that impact fee comes out at. Okay, and so looking right here under transportation, that impact fee would be $1,406.79. That is about 66%, if I'm looking straight across here, increase in our current impact fee, because right now we're charging $848, but it's 14% below the county average of the 16 different cities that have that fee. And so part of, before you go into the public hearing, that we're looking for is that, as before you open the public hearing, I wanted to give you that information, because what we're looking for after the public hearing and after discussion is we would like a recommendation from the Planning Commission to adopt that fee at that maximum amount of number that can be billed for that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And Chris didn't have it in his presentation because I didn't give him that information. So that's my fault, and so that's why I'm kind of standing up and giving that to you now. Okay. So I don't know, Brett, if you were headed towards the public hearing.
I was
now.
headed.
Right.
If-
And so that's good. If
That
you
it?
have, if you have any questions to me regarding that, that fee would be $1,406.79. That's the maximum allowable fee that can be charged for an impact fee for transportation.
Yeah.
And so that's what staff recommendation is in this case. And we're looking, if the Planning Commission agrees with that you give that recommendation to the City Council, you agree with that number. Okay?
Any comments on that?
When was the last time it was raised, and why has it stayed so low?
That's a good question. The last time it was raised was 2020. But realize between 2020 and today, our project costs have basically doubled or more in just the cost of doing business. And that's why we're at that level.
And actually, that leads to maybe a comment about, as long as we can justify this in the way that you just described, I think that's
Right. Let me pull up one more
part of the
thing really quick,
recommendation.
if I can. And I apologize that this is a little bit skewed, but let's look at this one here, because I want to go to a different. I can, so small. So, this gives you an overview of how we fit with that transportation fee. So you can see our Springville current is here. And this is where we're proposing, right here. This is the county average. And these are other cities that cost more. And these are cities that don't have a transportation impact fee at least at this time. So you can see where we fit into that mix for the transportation impact fee.
So
We're not-
what does maximum allowable mean? I mean, is that
That
just
means-
what it's set at right now? But I mean, could the city council decide, yeah, we want to make it a higher number?
Yeah,
Or how does that work?
let me do this. And again, I apologize for jumping around, but this will help you understand that. So basically, impact fees, they separate out growth-related costs from deficiencies in your system, or things that the city needs to put more money into to make better, in pipelines or whatever. In this case, we're talking about roadways. And so Utah law says that growth pays for itself and nothing more. That means that you don't want the city to charge growth more than they should be paying for the growth that they're doing. In the same respect, we don't want growth to pay for deficiencies in the city, right? And so this is really good. The law makes what it gives a really good balance, because the ratepayers are paying to keep the system going, right? The transportation system. If new growth comes along and there has to be changes, growth should pay for itself, right? The ratepayers shouldn't have to pay for growth. And so in this case, there's a balance. And so the maximum allowable fee is what, based on the law, what the city can charge a developer, because his development is coming in and causing money to be spent, either by the developer to add new roadways or by the city to fix roadways that are a problem because of the development. Now, the city council can go through and they can actually charge less than the maximum allowable fee. But you have to be careful with that, because, and watch the scales, if we take away growth, if we make it less, it has to be added somewhere else, because the project cost is still the same. And so in this case, if you don't charge the maximum allowable fee, the ratepayers would have to pay the difference in that. Does that make sense? And what you're getting with that is you're getting an unbalanced thing where the ratepayers are now paying for a portion of the growth that's coming in. Does that help explain it a little bit better?
Absolutely.
Okay?
And how's this communicated to the public,
Which?
the whole thing?
All of this?
Yeah,
All the documents have been put out and noticed and posted.
already?
And we posted this meeting to where we should have a room full of people clamoring here. And that's really how it goes. It's on the website, it's on the places it needs to be by law.
Understood.
Yeah.
I understand. I understand people don't see it, myself included.
Andy's been showing us this as we've gone through each of the plans, so
Right.
Yeah.
that's been really
Yeah.
helpful.
And in fact, you're gonna see this same slide in my presentation that's
Great.
coming up on stormwater,
It's very clear and helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
okay?
Good job, both of you. Any other comments, questions? All right. If not, we will open the meeting to the public for any comments or questions, including those that may be off-site. Looks like we don't have any public input. Do I have a motion?
Seeing no one come forward, I'll move that we close the public hearing.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
I am too. All right, we'll move on to the next, and I assume, Brad, you're doing this whole presentation on the next one?
So then what I need though is I
Oh, we need a motion, yeah.
need a motion, right,
Yeah.
for this transportation master plan.
Yeah, do I have a
And I put
motion?
the number back up here. That should be written in the, you have it
It's,
written?
it's
Okay.
here. It's
Yeah.
here. Anyone?
I'll motion it. I motion to recommend adoption by the city council of the 2024 update to the transportation master plan, impact fee facility plan, and impact fee analysis, and stormwater capital facility plan and master plan. Impact fee,
Yeah, do they have them both?
We haven't gone over the storm.
This is-
Yeah, we haven't gone over the
yes, you got
storm.
separate.
Okay, so let's just take out,
Okay.
I'll second that.
we'll get it right here in just a second.
So separate it after the analysis.
Right.
A motion to recommend adoption by the city council of the 2024 update to the transportation master plan, impact fee facility plan, and impact fee analysis.
I second it.
Okay, is this roll call? I can't remember. No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm a aye also. All right, you got your recommendation. Somebody better get ready with that next motion.
I like the efficiency effort, though. I'm,
Just get out of here.
All right, Brad, it's all you.
Okay, we're gonna start this one over now from the beginning. And so, for some of you that's seen this, it's gonna be in similar format. Stormwater's a little more complicated though, so this is a little bit longer presentation, but I'll try to get through it fairly quickly,
We
so.
won't ask any questions then.
that's a kind way of telling us. Wait till the end.
Okay, so many years ago, Mayor Clyde was sitting there, and it was late. It was like midnight, and he goes, "Brad, can you keep it short?" And I said, "Okay, just say yes." And then there's this pause, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Well, you have to say something." So I won't
Didn't
just.
say how
So
short.
Brad, will you keep it short?
Yeah. So again, we do master plans because the first thing we have to do is establish the level of service. Because whatever level of service we do is gonna make the costs change, and they can sometimes change dramatically. Now, we're talking about the stormwater master plan. We have to look at growth. What's gonna happen in the future when our city grows, and how's that gonna affect our stormwater system, right? We have to look at what the assets are we have in the community, what kind of pipelines, what detention basins and so forth, what might have excess capacity and so forth. Then we gather flow data. What is it actually happens when we get storms? You know, what's going on out there in the real world? And then with that information, we can run a hydraulic model, and we can try to set it up in a way that we can understand what will happen in the future. And from that, then we can formulate capital projects. So this is why we do the master plans. That's the first document we're talking about. That's the original document that starts this process. So the master plan itself, we have a study area, and it's the tan area. And you notice there's a little bit of areas outside of our boundaries, and those are areas that actually drain back into this community. But we do not take into effect the mountains, which means if we have a gigantic storm up there along the mountains, we could get flooded, because we just don't have the ability, and nobody does along the Wasatch Front, to handle something that big that comes in, okay? So we have about 17,000 acres in the study area. And there are portions of the city that are outside, like I discussed. And so what is the level of service? We're gonna talk about different things that we set that gets us started in doing these projects. So the frequency, we use a 10-year initial drainage, which means our pipelines out there are sized such that the 10-year frequency storm can be handled within the pipes of the city or in the ditches, the conveyance structures. Our basins are set to 25 years, so a much bigger storm, our basins that the pipes flow into can handle that, and what the water can flow into these basins through the pipes, but the way it gets out of the basins and keeps going towards the lake, there's an orifice plate that slows how much water can get out, and so those basins in a 25-year storm have to be a little bit bigger to handle that. And then, of course, we talk about the 100-year flood. And we'll talk a little bit more about what happens when we get into that situation. And we use what's called a modified Farmer-Fletcher curve. And basically this curve, and you can see minutes going along the bottom, and then how much rainfall you have going up in the y-axis, is typically our storms, they start out, then we have a hard part of the storm where it's really raining hard, and then it tapers off with time. Okay? So, this is what it looks like in the stormwater system. And we'll talk a little bit more about this again, but basically the 10-year storm stays in the pipes. When we get past the 10-year storm, those pipes can start to surcharge to where they start filling up into the drainage inlets. And then when you get closer to that 100-year storm, they're actually coming out. They're not going in the drainage inlets anymore. And the streets become the rivers, or I wouldn't call it rivers, but they become the stream flow. And then the way our building code is set up is our homes need to be above the top back of curb. And I think it's 2 feet, isn't it? Is it 2 feet? Yeah. So top back of curb, we like the homes up there. That way, because when it gets even more, it doesn't flood into the houses. Now, we have older houses in the community where it's not that way, because in the olden days, the flood irrigation was exactly opposite of this, right? The yards were lower, so we could get the water into them and the roads were higher. But this is basically the level of service that we set up for this. Okay? We also look at the soil groups. And so we look at the National Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, and we actually classify the soils. We have 4 different types of soils. A is high infiltration, gravels and sand. Water goes into it really quickly, all the way down to D, which is with clays. So what do you think we have most of in our community?
It's clay.
Clays. And in fact, 75% of our area is in the clays, which means they don't accept water very well, which means our pipes have to be a little bit bigger because we get more runoff from storms, okay? So we look at soils. We also look at land use. How's the land being used? Agricultural area is going to soak up a lot more when you have, like downtown here where there's a lot of pavement and stuff. It runs off quicker. So we look at the different things in that. We have shape files that we look at. We look at the National Land Cover data set, the foothills, some of those areas that come off in. And then we also have Utah water-related land use, which is the land itself that's not developed. And so we go through and we look at how much percent impervious is directly connected in. So when it rains, what happens with the different types of lands? We'll talk more a little bit about that in just a minute here. So you can see this is the existing land cover and zoning. So we take that into account also as we establish this level of service, anywhere from low density to high density, agricultural, and so forth. Then we look at something called SCS curves, and this also, we look at the soil groups that we've talked about, the land uses, the ground cover type, and then we look at the directly connected impervious areas. And what we're doing now is we're describing the relationship between precipitation and runoff. When it rains, how fast is it getting out and trying to get in the system? When it's raining on grass, it doesn't come out very fast, right? But when it's raining on your driveway, it comes out really fast. So we look at that. So the lower the number, the more pervious it is. The higher the number, it's less pervious. So we're going to look at 7 different areas, and we look at these. So this is low density, where you have in these cross-hatched areas here are the impervious surface areas, the street and so forth, rooftops. Medium density, you can see that more density, more runoff, quicker. Medium high density, a lot of rooftops, a lot of pavement, so forth. High density, all the red is impervious, that's the rooftops, and then all the X areas, that's the streets, and so forth. Commercial industrial, even more runoff, a lot quicker. Schools and churches, they have their own factors also. They have a lot of playground. There's also very large buildings and lots of parking lots, right? And then open space, you don't have a whole lot there. And so we look at those and we can actually go through and say, this is basically the way our community is. this is where it's zoned in the future for these lands that aren't developed, and we can actually determine what it's gonna be like in the future and how fast runoff's gonna go. With that, we look at these SCS curves, and we can see, and so we actually, with the soil types and so forth, we can say how fast the water's running off. Remember, the higher the number, the less pervious. So like when you have open space, the numbers are a lot lower. When you have industrial, the numbers are a lot higher. Soil types, clay, gravel types. So we use all this to set up what we call our modeling. So this is what we've done, and because we're actually changing how we do things in the sense of our community, and Josh is a lot involved in this. Our single-family residents used to be around quarter-acre lots, right? And a lot of us that are older that might be lucky enough to have a lot that's a single-family residence. But a lot of the younger people can't afford that, and so as you pack more houses into area, you get less pervious surface. You get more impervious. So what happens is we need to make sure that we're building those correctly. So we've actually gone down to less than 2,000 square foot lots. And believe it or not, we now have 850 square foot lots. Westfield Central. And they're building up 3 stories. And they don't have really any grass or anything. And so there's a lot of rain coming off on those. So we have those taken into account. And as we charge the impact fees, we want to make sure that we're getting the right numbers for the right size lots. So now we've got a whole range here of different areas, what we would charge for those. So this is how we're billing those. Multifamily and non-residential, so when you have like apartment complexes, they're actually billed, they bring their plans in and they have to say what their impervious surface is, and we bill them by square foot. And so it's trying to make everything fair and appropriate depending on what type of development and what size of lot you have. So what we do as we set up this model is we take the community and we break it up into small parts, what we call drainage basins or natural waterways. And then from that, and you can see there's a lot of different areas in here. All of these are little areas that get put into the model. So it's really trying to get us really accurate on what we're doing here as far as stormwater runoff. So with the growth rate, we're looking at, we want to make sure that there's this symbiotic relationship between impervious surface, which is where driveways, rooftops, and pervious, which could be like the grass or landscaping around a home. And so if you have a certain size of lot, we say a percentage is impervious and a percentage is pervious, which means that water can soak in. And we want to make sure that we're consistent with our pressurized irrigation master plan, because we don't want to have a lot that's 10,000 square feet and we say on that lot, 7,000 might be pervious and 3,000 is impervious. That works, because then when we're billing for pressurized irrigation, they're getting billed correctly, the 3,000 or the 7, and then the other. But if we don't put them right together, if we don't get them right, we could be billing an area that's bigger than the lot, and we don't want to be doing that. So we've made sure that we're not doing that with our pressurized irrigation, our outdoor watering versus the stormwater runoff. So we've been very careful with that. So our growth rates are the same for those in the water and the stormwater. And so it looks like we're growing about 14,000 ERUs over the next 10 years. So looking at our system assets, we have about 151 miles of pipeline, ranging from 12 to 22 to 72 inches in diameter, and about 1,845 inlets. So when you see those in the curves, we have almost 2,000 of those. So there's a lot of places we're bringing water in, and a lot of pipeline that we're looking at. Like I said and I'm just going to step over to the diagram here. It should, whoops, I guess it didn't. But the picture I showed you before of how it starts in the pipes, then it starts coming out in the street, and then it goes up. So this is the way that the water's moving, is basically it goes in the pipelines. Pretty soon the inlets are all full. Then it gets in natural drainages, which could be the street or natural drainages that go along in creek beds. and then into the roadways, and then even in the irrigation conveyances. So we have all these different mechanisms that we can try to dissipate, and then we have 121 different detention basins throughout the community. So there's a lot of places where that water gets held up and then carefully let go out so it could go to the lake.
So that's current,
Yes,
what you just showed.
that's our current assets. Yep, right there. That's a lot of pipe
Yeah.
for stormwater. Okay, so once we get all this information, soil types, impervious surface, all this, we put it together, we start making a model. And we start modeling what's gonna happen both existing in our existing community, what will happen with growth. So we set up these nodes and so forth and pipelines, and we start running the model. And what we have is a stormwater management model. Somebody got really cool and called it SWIM, right? But anyway, we have different conveyances, and they could be, like I said, pipes, ditches, canals, channels, all that. Then we put nodes to where these pipes are going into, right? Different nodes, and they leave and go to through a different pipe to another node. And we more or less get the bigger pipes and look at the way it's going. So the nodes connect the conveyances with the different subbasins. We also put in irrigation inputs because we actually use drainage ditches that they use for irrigation also. So when we run this, we run the model as if the irrigation is always flowing, which means the ditch already has water in it. Can it handle more stormwater added on top of it? And so the SWIM model can determine water depth, flow rate, and capacity of the conveyances in any given precipitation event. And we can change the different size of storms and so forth. It's really a cool thing how it works out. So back to this, the pipes carry the 10-year. In the 100-year event, we're all the way up outside of the streets and into other areas. We have not had a 100-year storm since I've been here for 20 plus years. We've had something close to 25, but we've never had a 100-year storm. And part of me doesn't want to be here when that happens.
Yeah,
So,
that close to 25
Yeah.
was
Yeah, and
scary enough, wasn't
it
it?
gets pretty full. And then, of course, the basins are set up to handle that 25. So that's our general design. And again, the roadways eventually, if we get those bigger storms and channels, fill up. So deficiencies, now, that's a careful word because in deficiencies, we talk about in like sewer pipes, that means a pipe that's too small. In stormwater, the pipes can be totally full and they can surcharge. That's part of the way we run our stormwater system, and every other community does it the same way, okay? So when I say deficiencies, they're acceptable. They're not acceptable in sewer, but they are in stormwater, okay? Our pipes full flow. We have minor surcharging in the manholes and vaults, and even gets out into the curb and gutter. And not all deficiencies necessitate capital improvements. For example, we have places in the community, and we all know where they are when we get these heavy storms. We're gonna have water backing up and it actually gets out into the street a little bit, right? And you have the one on Mill Pond area down there in Fourth East that the kids love to go through when it rains. They head down there in their cars. They wanna get into that. We are looking into fixing that deficiency, but it's not life-threatening or it's not a huge problem, right? But that is a deficiency that's on our list, okay? And so they actually list the different deficiencies. And I don't expect you to look through this. There's gonna be a map come up here that I can show it to you. So all these areas in pink here. So for an example, this is Center Street right here. And this is 13th East. And there's a pipeline right here that in a 25-year event might surcharge a little bit. I've never seen that since I've been here. Okay, but that, when they're running the models, that's one that could be an issue that we should be watching for, okay? And so and then we have others that are watches to where things could happen. This is along Center Street where it flattens out. Actually it's right as it's flattening out where they say a pipe might be a little bit too small when we run the model. Now, this one right here will probably go away because if you notice, if you were driving around the roundabout lately, there's a big black pipe coming out of it heading down towards the high school. Maybe you didn't see that because it happened in about a 3 or 4 day but we actually were diverting some of that stormwater flow that would have gone down 13th. We're now running it through the new high school area down to the creek, which makes that one go away. So we do things to these deficiencies as we can to work them, but again, these deficiencies are not part of the impact fee. So different capital projects that we have, and we're looking at impact fees. So there's about $5.9 million worth of projects we could do in the stormwater system, like some of the ones I described, they call deficiencies. We don't have to do, but we keep a watch on, and as we have the funding, we can go through and grab the ones that we think are the worst. Of that 5.9 million, there's actually some of those that have some excess capacity in them that are impact fee eligible. So there's projects in there that could be okay for growth when we go and do ours, okay? There's also some master plan projects that we need to do. We call those PE projects. Those are actually from the 2014 master plan that are also watches that we're keeping an eye on, but we haven't completed all of those yet. And then growth projects, we call CNRD projects, and I'm going to bring up a map. There's about $38 million worth of growth projects that are impact fee eligible. And so with the projects that are impact fee eligible, plus the buy-in cost and then planning costs over the 10-year window, we have about $38 million worth of impact fee eligible costs and about 14,060 ERUs that are available because of that. Am I going too fast or am I doing okay? It's complicated.
The numbers are mind-boggling.
Okay, so I'm going to go to this here. This is the impact fee for stormwater. We are, unfortunately, would be the highest in the county. Now, let me give a little bit discussion in that. And that is that there's some cities that don't even have stormwater collection systems. Mapleton, for example, puts everything in sumps, which means you have a drainage inlet, a curb face inlet, that goes into a big tank that soaks into the ground. Over time, those plug up with silts and they don't work very good anymore. So in the long term, Mapleton's probably going to be suffering from that. We have pipelines that get it out to the lake. That's what we've chosen to do. Other communities like Provo, for example, they're doing the impact fee twos. And they're doing the impact fee also, and they're bringing their system up.
So you're implying that they'll be charging more in the near future?
I'm implying that they will probably be charging more in the future. I am. And I think in this case, our fee is one of the, where we've actually gone through and looked at it very closely, and this is what it really needs to be.
Where are we at today?
We're at $616.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
So, ouch, right? That's a lot of,
The one with,
lot of
the
stuff.
question was asked earlier, when was this one raised?
This has been quite a while.
Yeah.
And rather than give a whole bunch of excuses, we didn't do our job the way we should have to get this here faster.
That was where I was going next.
Yeah. And so that's a public works issue that, and I could give you a list, but it doesn't matter. It's been too long. Okay?
I think Hunter wants the list.
That's okay.
And I don't want to sit here and give excuses. We didn't do our job.
I mean, there's
should've
no,
done better.
there's no way to, you know, do a 5-year ramp up on this,
There is,
but,
if the council chooses. But remember that balance slide I showed you?
yeah.
Every time you don't charge the right amount, somebody still has to pay for it.
So you're saying that for the past number of years, somebody's been paying for it?
Well,
Because we're way too low right
You can,
now.
but we haven't had that much growth in the last couple of years either.
We haven't?
So we haven't lost as much. We've slowed down. If you go back to when we were really growing, and then we slowed down, and now we're starting to ramp up again. And so yes, you could say there's some dollars lost here. But what I'm giving you today is what the actual costs are for the projects that are growth related.
So,
Plus the fact that the stormwater has the most viable damage possibility to the residents.
Yeah.
It's a very real, if it goes over, if it goes into people's homes.
Right, and the implications
Huge
are
impact.
huge.
Stormwater is really, and I think a lot of cities are starting to grasp that, and I think that's why you're seeing this, this
So-
change in it, because a lot of people are not addressing it, and the people are paying for it one way or another. So-
Now, long time ago when we first did this, and again, we didn't do our job in the sense that should have been doing this a lot quicker in iterations. That $616 was not the maximum allowable. This was back when a lot of the cities were just being pushed into this by the federal government, and everybody was doing the very minimum they could, and they didn't want to upset development. So that 616 is not a maximum allowable fee back when it was put into place.
Has this already been communicated as well
To who?
to the public?
Yes, that's what
That
we're doing.
Yeah, but even before the recommendation,
Well-
the recommendation has been communicated to the public, not the
Right.
change, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and the presentation is
Yeah.
me trying to communicate it
yep, understood.
to the public.
Well, plus the ability to model these things has increased with
Right.
technology. It used to be, you had to just a lot of manual calculations, but now they can run models that will tell you
Yeah,
what's
Yeah.
gonna happen, where it's gonna happen, how do you prevent it,
well, and we get on the phone and literally talk to the consultant,
yeah.
and within an hour or two, they can give us an answer on something because of the models. And so it is different. So there's a lot of reasons why we went from 616 to 2779. There's a lot of different reasons, and one of the biggest reasons is we didn't do our job in keeping this going.
It's all water under the pipes anyways.
So today, and then I think,
Well, but this is just
I
working
think Hunter
forward.
had
We're
another
not
comment as
catching up.
well.
We can't catch up, we're just using growth related in the future.
right,
So this is a true impact, not a,
yeah,
we're
this
trying
is
to
a
catch
true
up.
impact for growth in over the
Well,
next 10 years.
and so that's where my question comes in is with a city like Saratoga Springs as an example, who has seen a tremendous amount of growth. How are they managing to keep their fees so low while still updating their system or keeping their system in line with what their
They
impact
could be the
fees are?
same as what we did, and they haven't updated it.
Okay, so that's what the question is. So the county average right now is skewed because the feeling that you're getting is that the cities haven't updated.
There's a lot of cities that haven't,
Right.
and there's some that don't even do it.
Okay.
Now, one of the things I am gonna say, and this is just to give you an idea, moving stormwater is really easy when you have a slope. And so if you notice, a lot of the deficiencies, there weren't very many at all on the eastern side, because we have a slope that moves down, but you get out past Fourth West, and everything goes flat, and that's
Yeah.
where the development is.
Yeah.
And then you have bigger pipes, bigger detention basins. We can't dig deep detention basins in the West Fields because we run into groundwater. And so they get very large, and land costs per acre are expensive. So we've got the worst case scenario. Our impact fee is really based on what's happening in the west, where it's flat and we have high groundwater, and that makes part of these costs why they're so high. So that's one reason why. And the change in construction costs in the last 2 or 3 years has doubled.
Then
So it's a
Saratoga
perfect
Springs-
storm.
Saratoga Springs, for example, does flow right to the lake. It's got a pretty
Very
good grade
gradual
to it.
slope.
You can tell from the stormwater plans that are being generated around the county. We do inspections and things, and it's a dramatic differences between the cities because of their problems that they're dealing with. We have great water in our springs, but then when it comes to stormwater, we go down and hit flat fast, so.
Okay, Brad.
So we'll keep going here. So this gives you an overall view, and we showed this last time to those that were in attendance. We're talking about stormwater, which is, and I didn't make it pink to show it really great, to really stand out, but that's the color we mark on the pavement when we show storm drains. We mark sewers green and water blue. So it's that color for the reason that that's just what we do. So this is when you're looking at the different impact fees that we're actually looking at. And these top 4 are the ones that come through Public Works. We've already talked to you guys about water, and we've already talked to you about sewer, wastewater, and now we're here with, and we talked to you today about transportation, and now we're talking about stormwater. So again, what I'm looking for is, do you as a planning commission, do you feel like that my recommendation as a staff is recommending the maximum allowable fee? And I go back to that balancing thing that I showed you. If the maximum allowable fee is not charged, the project cost is still the same and the money has to come from somewhere else.
If the right number's the right number, you know.
And that's what I'm saying is the
then
right
we don't-
number,
then we
yeah.
don't have a choice.
I think though what you're talking about who bears the responsibility. Which citizens, the new ones coming in or the ones that are here? And so, I mean, the sins of the father, you know, we got a problem. You know, we didn't charge enough. And so now who's going to pay that? Only the new?
So remember though, when you say we didn't charge enough,
Yeah.
we're talking about development from 90 days from now or 90 days from next Tuesday when the
Right.
council adopts it forward. So it's really not the enough.
It can't be backwards.
It's not backwards, it's from that day, and I say 90 days, because when you enact something, the council, you have to wait 90 days by law before you can start charging it. So it's the past is the past,
Yeah.
but the future is what number I'm giving you today.
So,
That's the developable billable cost.
Right, that's the
Can
maximum
be.
allowable cost that
Yep.
that you can
So-
charge.
Brad, basically, and tell me if I'm missing the point here, but the whole principle based around this cost is the area in which growth is occurring.
That's correct.
Because we didn't have the same costs as we were building on the slope that we will have now in flat grounds.
That's correct.
So the reality is it's gonna cost a whole lot more to move stormwater on flat ground than it would be in a slope.
That is one of the main factors, yes.
Yeah.
The other
So,
one is the cost of.
I think that's probably the largest impact to this cost change is the topography of where we're talking about.
I think that's part of it, but I think the cost is just.
Yeah, also the
Right,
construction costs have
actual
been.
costs of
I don't want to say that's the only
materials.
one, but that's a good point. There, also the mere fact that the inflation, the construction costs have been enormous.
Yeah. So between the two,
That cost is way up
right,
there.
So, Brad, zooming back out as we're looking at the total of all of our fees, right now we're sixth in the county out of 20 cities.
If you add in public safety and parks with that too.
Right. So, looking at that approach, is it under your professional opinion that 6 mark where we're at with we're actually going to start moving down because other cities are going to start updating their
Well,
impact fees
I
as
think
well?
you're gonna see, a change in stormwater in all the cities. I really can't speak for parks or public safety, but I can for, the others. I can say that if you look out of our water and our sewer,
Right.
we're at the very bottom. Our stormwater is one of the highest and we're dead mid-range, right on in transportation.
Yep.
And so I think as the other
Stormwater,
communities,
from the good explanation that you gave, is we have flat here, sloped here, and it's just the luck of the draw for us. We're gonna have to deal with that.
I think
higher
that's part of
cost
it.
Yep.
versus Saratoga Springs.
yeah, and that'll determine what all of our neighbors do based on where their
Right.
developments happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
Remember, the reason why we're one of the lowest in water is we have springs. It's mostly gravity fed all the way through until we get into the summer, right? Because we're using our springs, and then we turn on the wells, in the summertime, and so our costs aren't very much. And so as development and so forth, it's not that expensive. The other thing too is many years ago in 2010, we put a 24-inch pipeline all the way out to the other side of the freeway for water at 2010 cost. Try and do that now,
Beautiful.
right?
Yeah.
So that's why we're able to, those are low, but as far as stormwater goes, there was nothing to build out to because it wasn't there.
Okay, any other comments, questions? And any more on your presentation?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with us while we ask some questions. All right, if there's no additional comments or questions, we'll open this for a public hearing. Anyone? Anyone? Anyone?
Not seeing anyone approach the podium, I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I also. Okay. Do I have a motion?
Any comments from anybody? Okay, I'll
Did a good job.
make a motion.
All right.
I'll make a motion to recommend adoption by the City Council of the 2024 update to the Stormwater Capital Facility Plan, the Master Plan Impact Fee Facility Plan, and impact fee analysis as per the Utah State Impact Fee Act.
My second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye also. Okay, is there anything else that needs to be brought up from anyone? All right, do I have a motion?
I move-
Motion for adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?